am free to go. But time cannot remove the only life I know, and only time will prove, yes, only time will prove if I have lost my way. 'Cause I hear tell about a heaven in Alberta where they've got all hell for basement. I have lost my way, but I hear tell about a heaven in Alberta where we've got all hell for basement.
Hi, everyone. Frankie here, New West Reset. Thanks a lot for shooting in and joining me here for another live stream. New West Reset Live, episode 15, number 15, digit 15. I don't know. Anyway, welcome. Appreciate it. Great to see all of you. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Top of the morning to you, laddies and lasses. I don't know. I'm not Irish. I'm Canadian, eh? So top of the morning to you, eh? I don't know. Anyway, it's St. Patrick's Day. So there you go. If you're Irish, then happy St. Paddy's Day to you. I guess it's just an excuse to go and watch a parade and drink green beer, I guess. I don't know. Sure. Why not? Why not? So yes, well, I said top of the morning. It's kind of morning-ish. 11 a.m. here locally, here in Calgary, Alberta, up in Canada, eh? And not a bad day today, well, I mean, considering it's, March 17th, -7 Celsius, which is about 20 Fahrenheit, plus 20 Fahrenheit. So, not exactly shorts and sandals weather, but, it's been worse. A guy has experienced a lot worse, so I'll put it to you that way. So anyway, as mentioned, welcome, 11 a.m. here. So again, a weird time of day. Friday nights are kind of busy around here. So a guy figured he would just go on, in the morning-ish, late morning, and chat with you. And today's topic is sort of a mishmash, a mashup, a bunch of stuff. None of it really pertaining that much to St. Patrick's Day. A little bit in terms of Irish in Alberta. Some of the earliest settlers, according to the narrative, were the Irish. Of course, depending on what narrative, some of the other earliest settlers were British, French, Scottish, Ukrainian, German, Chinese. So, depends on what source, I guess. That same old song and dance. But yeah, I got a little bit of that. And I want to talk about Calgary's trolley park, which not a lot of people are aware of. And it's not really your traditional trolley park. It's more what you would think of as a trolley park with a Canadian spin to it, where you'd be like, oh yeah, that's typical. That's typical of what they're doing up over there in Canada, eh? So yeah, we're going to have a look at that as well. I've got some, a portion, a morsel of some footage that I found on PBS public broadcasting out of Boston, Massachusetts, from back in, I think, in the 80s or 90s, somewhere in there, that talks a little bit about this trolley park here in Calgary, known as Bowness Park. Of course, the trolley system, the streetcars are long gone. I think 1951 was the last streetcar service here in Calgary. They did rebuild some of the streetcar over at our Pioneer Village themed amusement park here in Calgary called Heritage Park. So some of the trolley runs through that, which is kind of cool. It was an electric trolley with, the overhead wires, and it ran a couple of routes throughout the city, mostly in the downtown core and some of the very immediate residential areas. Excuse me, I'm just having me a hot cup of coffee, hot cup of Joe, as they say. Cheers to you. Isn't that the worst when somebody does that with their coffee, right? You're sitting in a donut shop or something. Some clown next to you is doing this. It's like, dude, I'm glad you're enjoying your coffee, but you don't have to share everything. Speaking of hot cup of Joe, Joe Cool's here. Hiya, Joe. Welcome. And a hearty howdy, and welcome to all of you that are listening in, lurking. Maybe you're lurking. Maybe you're at work and you're just kind of listening and not really watching or typing in the chat, but you're just kind of lurking. So welcome. I don't know what you're doing. Probably a lot of you over at Autodidactic and Bernie, because I think they're still streaming. Didn't realize they were going to be streaming when I scheduled this stream. So it's a tight-knit group here today at New West Reset. A tight-knit group of just a handful of us. But anyway, we'll get into some of the topics in a bit. First of all, a couple of catch-ups here with the channel. A few sort of housekeeping things. Firstly and foremostly, is that a word? That's not even a word. But firstly and foremost, hello and thank you and welcome to a whole bunch of new subscribers in the last little while. Really appreciate that. Been seeing a lot of new names, new avatar little thingies, like these little things up here, your little icons and stuff. So good to see you and welcome, and thanks a lot for coming out here to this goofy Canadian out here in the wild west of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, here in the wild frontier. You joining me? Been getting a lot of positive feedback, lots of comments. That's great. And if you're not so hip to the YouTube thing, I have a MeWe as well. Link in the description. Everything that I post here and then some is posted on MeWe. I'm fixing to get going with a couple of other platforms, probably BitChute and maybe, I don't know, Rumble or something. Just as backups and just in case and whatnot. So yeah, look for that in the future. What else is going on? Speaking of subscribers, creeping up on 1,000 subscribers. You're little old me, so thank you. That's great. I've got kind of a thing planned for 1,000 subscriber once I hit that benchmark, that threshold, whatever. I want to do a meet and greet here in the city to anybody that's interested in meeting up with me, and do a Mudflood walkabout tour of Stephen Avenue. Pretty much 9-10 blocks of that avenue are designated historical site, and there's a bunch of old world buildings there, and maybe a guy will sneak us around some of the back alleys and stuff, and we'll look at some of the stuff that maybe not a lot of people dare to have a peekaboo at, because, you know, back alleys in big cities aren't always the most inviting. But as a group with cameras in hand and maybe a camera in one hand and a coffee in the other or something, coffee will be on me, or a beer or something afterwards. But yeah, I think that'll be really fun. So hoping late spring, early summer when I cross that threshold. So if you're on the fence, if you're thinking of subscribing, if you're just, I don't know, randomly stumbled bass backwards into this live stream or one of my videos, and you're thinking, you know what, I'm pondering subscribing to this feller, don't hesitate, please. It'd be great. It's going to be a lot of fun, and really looking forward to that. Of course, in the meantime, I'm going to continue to upload every Sunday like clockwork, and every midweek, sort of Wednesday. Sundays generally are my boots on the ground, sort of kind of like the Stephen Avenue or 8th Avenue downtown 1,000 subscriber thingy. Kind of boots on the ground, mud flood tours of either a street or a little neighborhood or even just a kind of a cool building. And then Wednesdays are kind of sort of little vignette videos that I make of, I don't know, old trains or old Canadian stuff, and I just set it to music. And of course, once a month, right here, like right now, New West Reset Live. That's usually mid-month, like today. And today's St. Paddy's Day, so if you're just tuning in, happy St. Patrick's Day to you. Just gonna have another slurp of the old coffee here. Joe Cool says, yes, they are in with Dutch Sins. Is that how you say that? Cincy? I don't know. I'm not familiar with this person. But okay, yeah. Alluding to Dick and Bernie and probably their live stream. So I think that's where a lot of folks are right now. 5 watching now, though. Count them 5. So thank you. Welcome. And yeah, I hope everybody's doing well, having a good week. As mentioned, today's Friday, so the weekend is upon us. So, you know, that's nice. And yeah, today we're going to be talking a little bit about some Irish Canadians, I guess. Irish in Alberta specifically, and in, kind of maybe in Calgary a little bit too. And then we're going to talk about Calgary's Trolley Park, Bowness Park. So I guess, hey, why not? Let's jump into it here. And I think, first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the Irish in Alberta, a little bit of the history of that. Oh, yeah. I remember the title of this article online here. It's from the Calgary Herald. Not too much of a clickbaity title to this article at all. It's called An Uncomfortable History of the Irish in Alberta. You know, yeah, that's, I don't know why that strikes me as funny, but anyway, hopefully you can see that there. An Uncomfortable History of the Irish in Alberta. And of course, green beer. So there you go. Happy St. Paddy's Day. Today in Alberta, St. Patrick's Day is widely celebrated every March 17th. Hey, there you go. That's today. With revelers decked out in leprechaun green and chugging frothy Guinness. Sure. I guess. I mean, I've partaken in that here in Calgary. Sure, why not? Speaking of Calgary, there's some Calgary Flames hockey footage there, propaganda for us to, you know, bread and circuses. Although I do like hockey. You know, I'm Canadian, so go figure, right? About 100 years ago, it was a much different reality for a small contingent of Irish immigrants who flocked to Alberta's prairies looking for opportunity, with the 1916 Easter Rebellion brewing in their homeland while they tried to settle in a decidedly imperial colony. Yes, Canada, part of the British Commonwealth. So, you know, bunch of filthy, disgusting colonies over here. Anyway, moving on. By 1916, Alberta had about 6,500 Irish immigrants and another 5,100 who could draw their lineage back to Ireland. According to federal census documents from the time, Calgary and Edmonton had combined population of those Irish heritage of just under 16,000, well behind Winnipeg, which led the prairie hubs, about 19,500. Winnipeg's sort of the geographical center of Canada. Right? So some guy with some historic blog gives the, here we go, the brief and sometimes uncomfortable history. Geez, when was this article written? Everybody's so uncomfortable with everything today. You think everything's supposed to be comfortable all the time? Anyway, what attracted Irish immigrants to settle in Alberta? Then the government was eager to promote the Prairie West as the main area of settlement. They would tour farmers and immigrants back to Ireland so they could tell them how much land was available. They were getting, get this, they were getting 160 acres for free. Just giving away the land here in Alberta. Virtually, right? Which was almost unimaginable. So they don't expand on, they were getting 1,600 or 160 acres for free virtually, which was almost unimaginable. Can you tell us what you mean by, so were they getting it for free or not? But anyway, okay, moving on. It was pretty clear there were all the standard misconceptions of Canada centered on the West, that it was cold. The government put in a fair amount of effort trying to promote the West as having a dry, bracing, and healthy climate that was better for health. Bracing. It's a fancy way of saying it's cold and windy, and in 6 to 7 months of winter, you're going to hate it. So brace yourself. Six hours here. Friends on lunch break watching. Pho, a Vietnamese spicy beef. Oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that pho soup. Yummy. Happy St. Pat's Day. Thank you. Thank you very much. And happy St. Patty's Day to you. And enjoy your lunch. I like pho. Good spicy soup, man. Delicious. Yeah, so the government they were promoting the prairies by touring farmers around and then sending them back to Ireland to say, tell everybody about how great it is out here. And it's bracing and healthy. Bracing and healthy climate. So the climate is very bracing. Yeah. And the snow's coming at you diagonally in your eyeballs, and it's minus 40 Celsius / minus 40 Fahrenheit. There's Bernie. Good to see you, Bernie. Welcome. What's this link? What's this link you're putting in here, Bernie? What is that? What's this thing? Ah, okay. Yeah. The stream. Wait, are you still streaming? Still streaming. Guy comes over here to promote. Yeah, we know. There's only 2 people watching over here, dude. Pretty sure people are well aware that you're streaming. Anyway, here we go. So where did Alberta's first Irish immigrants go? The earliest identifiable cluster. I like how they, the clusters of them flocked. Because you got to continue the narrative that's been going on for a couple hundred years now that the Irish aren't quite human. So you just talk about them like they're animals. But anyway, cluster of people from Ireland that were ranchers around Fort Macleod. Fort Macleod, sort of north central Alberta. They took up ranching in the 1870s and 1880s and seemed to be associated with the Northwest Mounted Police in some way. a weird little nugget of information there, don't you think? They took up ranching in the 1870s and 1880s and seemed to be associated with the Northwest Mounted Police in some way. So they don't seem too sure if, in fact, they were associated with the Northwest Mounted Police. And if so, in what way? Because they just make vague reference in some way. That's weird. But they're not sure. Like, why even mention if they're associated with the Mounties or not, if they weren't sure and in what capacity? But anyways, there's that word cluster again. It was a cluster of sons of wealthier Irish landowners. So they would have been second and third sons who weren't inheriting land in Ireland. Some even went home to marry women from Ireland and then come back. Okay. So it was, let's say, a second or third or fourth or fifth born son of a wealthy Irish landowner over in Ireland, but they wouldn't have any hopes of inheriting daddy's land, so they came here to get their 160 acres, basically of free land, more or less, in Fort MacLeod, which was a Mountie fort, apparently. Well, I guess they would. I mean, if that's where the fort was, and that's where the Mounties were stationed, and that's where a lot of the Irish settled to start their ranches and farms, then of course they would be associated in some way with the Mounties. The Mounties are the cops, so they would just have social interaction. They'd go to the same church, meet at the market, whatever. I mean, the cops are members of the community, right? So it's weird, but anyway. And again, I don't know how they knew that, how many sons some of these wealthy Irish land. I mean, it's all just sounds to me like it's conjecture because they're not really citing any other source material to sort of confirm. Anyway, here we go. Moving on. With talk of revolution back in Ireland around the First World War, however, St. Patrick's Day celebration was observed in Alberta. It was tricky to support independence. It would have been uncomfortable for some, and the majority would have been muted in spirit. Around the time, these things were generally observed privately. But there were little windows of celebration after 1913. Pretty much any expression of being Irish of any sort or belief that wasn't expressly unionist wasn't popular. All right, so you had to be sort of for the crown in some sort of way. All right. Then you were good, right? But if you're independent-minded, independently thinking Irish for an independent Ireland, you're a piece of crap, apparently, and weren't allowed to drink green beer. You weren't allowed to, play games with the other reindeer. The majority of the Irish immigrants came here from Ulster, and it was a period of significant economic downturn in Ulster that and because they were unionists, a political movement that favored political union with Great Britain, they generally wanted to stay in the empire. So they wanted to get out of Ireland because of all the shenanigans, shall we say, going on. But they didn't want to, they still wanted to be part of the union, if you will. Still want to be part of the Commonwealth, part of Great Britain, right? So it was either Canada, Australia, India, New Zealand, right? A handful of African nations. And that was about it, really, right? So if Alberta was unionist, or in other words, pro-Britain, where did the Republican or the independent-minded Irish wind up? They went to the U.S. The U.S. was primarily getting poorer residents, those who were more in line with the Republicans looking to end British rule. Okay. The ones coming primarily to Canada who have been slightly better off, and a lot of them would have had imperial connections. The famine in Ireland in the mid-1880s made the U.S. the natural place to go. All right, so if you were anti-England and Irish, you went to the U.S. especially if you're poor for some reason. I don't know. Anyway. Awkward history notwithstanding, why did St. Patrick's Day rebound following the Great War? St. Patrick's Day provided an opportunity to be Irish and Canadian at the same time. St. Patrick's Day became acceptable to celebrate because you could depoliticize it. All right, there you go. So that's that's something. It's kind of interesting. There's some odd, I don't know what you would call it, aspects of that narrative there, but be that as it may. I don't know how uncomfortable it was. See, it's kind of a clickbaity title. An uncomfortable history of the Irish in Alberta. Okay, take it easy there, buddy. Take it easy. That wasn't all that uncomfortable. So if you're just tuning in, welcome. My name is Frankie. Thanks for shooting in and joining me here. New West Reset. And this is New West Reset Live, number 15 on this St. Patrick's Day. So top of the morning to you. Happy St. Patrick's Day. It's not really top of the morning at all. I'm not really sure what that means. I think it means the beginning of the morning. Like in music, when they say take it from the top, they mean take it from the beginning. Right? So it's obviously not the beginning of the morning. Creeping up on 11:30 a.m. here locally. Temperature shooting up, just a shooting up here. It's when I started, it was -7 Celsius, like 20 degrees Fahrenheit. But now it's a balmy -4 Celsius. Almost ready now. That's like 25 Fahrenheit. Almost ready to bust out the swim trunks and the sunblock. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But anyways, thanks for joining me here. I appreciate it as always. Got a few more watching now. That's great to see. Thank you. Welcome, welcome. As mentioned, we've got Joe Cool here. Where is that guy? I saw him. There he is. Joe Cool's here. Sig kind of popping in and out on his lunch break. Hopefully he doesn't get caught listening to this jackassery and chicanery while he's at work. Hey, look at this. Look at this. Cruz. I'm sorry. I'm butchering that, but Cruz Incorporated. Hello from Calgary. Well, howdy. Howdy, neighbor. Howdy, neighbor. And welcome. Hello, hello. Thanks for shooting in. Appreciate it. David M is here. JJ Organics in his house. Hello. Says he's not Irish, but he can drink with the best of them. No, I'm not Irish either. I mean, I'm Canadian, right? And most Canadians are a mix of something. Most people in the West are anyways, and that's fine. My family's, they talk about diversity and inclusion and all this stuff all over the interwebs now. It's trying to make everybody crazy and put everybody in boxes so that we all hate each other, which is stupid. But speaking of which, I mean, diversity, my family's pretty diverse, but in a natural way, right? It just occurred naturally. I'm French Canadian, half French descent, half British descent, but then that British splits up into like Scottish and Irish and English and German, the usual Heinz 57 white guy mix, right? On the French side, it's French and Italian, also with a little bit of English or British in there. Then I've got some aunties and uncles that are, Greek and Colombian and Armenian, and from Trinidad. I've talked about this before. The food at our family cookouts is delicious. Delicious! I don't know why I don't weigh 600 pounds like that fantastic... I'm getting really off topic here, but that fantastic movie, The Whale, with Brendan Fraser. Again, bred circuses and all that. He won the Oscar for Best Actor. The Oscars, who cares, right? But Brendan Fraser, man, I like Brendan Fraser. And in that movie, he wore a great big suit because he played the part of a guy who I guess weighed 650 pounds. Apparently, that fat suit weighed like 300 pounds. So, tip of the hat to Brendan Fraser for lugging around a 200 to 300 pound fat suit or whatever for, weeks and weeks on end in a film shoot. That's crazy. It's crazy. Sig says has an that's a tongue twister. Sig says, have an awesome day, everyone. Please drive carefully today. You don't drink and drive. You pull over and have sips. And then you can just flip the hood up or the bonnet, if you're English, up on your car, put the four-way hazards on and walk home. And just leave a note on your windshield. Say, sorry, my car broke down. And then you could just get it later when you're sober. Especially if it's a nice day. Go for a walk. Somebody's saying David M's blocked? No, you're not. You're not blocked. You're right there. I see. It's all good. It's all good, sir. I don't know what's going on. Be nice in the chat there. Come on now. Be nice, people. Born and raised in Calgary. Been here for 40 years. Well, bless you. Bless you, sir or ma'am or miss. I'm not a native-born Calgarian, but I have lived here for a long time. Long time. I was born in Montreal. Moved here in 1980 when I was 10, so, that's a long time. 42 going on 43 years. So, yeah, around the same time-ish. So, yeah. It's great. So once again, if you are just tuning in, welcome, and thanks for shooting in and joining me here. Frankie, New West Reset, live, number 15. A smorgasbord, a potpourri, if you will, of topics here today on the channel. Talk a little bit of St. Patrick's Day, just because today is St. Patrick's Day, so there you go. Talk about sort of Irish in Alberta. The last article we just covered a few moments ago saying that there was an association between the Irish and the Mounties, the police here in Alberta. And I've got another article that I think touches on that a little more. Irish cowboys too, because, why not? Because Calgary's got that big narrative of, cowboys and the wild Indians. Look out now. Just like, the Wild West in the United States, right? Oklahoma and Cheyenne and all them joints, right? With the gunslingers riding into town with the shoot 'em ups and the, the same narrative here in the prairies of Canada, especially in Alberta. The gateway to the Rockies, the gateway to the New West, hence the name of my channel. So, of course, why not, with the Irish settlers coming directly from Ireland to be farmers, why not have them be Irish cowboys too, I guess? I don't know. Why not? And we're also going to talk a little bit about Calgary's trolley park or streetcar park at the end of the line, at the terminus of the Calgary streetcar network and line at Bowness Park, and how a local Calgary resident / landowner / businessman parlayed with the city to be able to get the trolley car from its former end of the line out to Bowness Park. And we'll get into that as well, because it's a pretty neat little story. And it's not your average American trolley park, or what do they call those parks? You see all of it, Luna parks. It's not like that, although there was rides and stuff, but much more typically Canadian, which we'll get to. Oh, he says it's it's Mr. and or Sir, kindly. There you go. Well, sir, thank you. He says, I'll be working in Montreal this summer, erecting a hockey arena. Oh, wow. There you go. Rawhide. Hit him up, move him out. Rawhide. Oh, I'm a terrible singer. I think I almost shattered my coffee mug with that off-key sampling of Rawhide. So my apologies. Just going to have a little more of my coffee. Like that annoying guy at the table next to you in the donut shop. Well, that's a good cup of coffee, eh? Anyway. Some say the Cowboys were the bad guys. Well, there was good guys and bad guys, right? The white hats and the black hats, right? That's where it all started, you know. But a real cowboy, like the actual cowboys, you know, they worked on cattle ranches and horse ranches and stuff like that. I mean, they just, you know, rounded up cattle, roped cattle to brand cattle, tended to the cattle, rustled the cattle, and would round them up and take them on cattle drives from one pasture or graze land to another, you know, tend to the birth of the calves during calving season, and you know, all that stuff, right? I think a lot of the gunfighters were just outlaws in general, and you know, if you're gonna be a criminal's a criminal, right? There, it's not like I very highly doubt that it was. If it did happen, it was pretty rare that some cattle rancher just woke up one morning and decided, you know what, I'm not going to tend to my herd of cattle here today, my 300 head of cattle here in the expansive, beautiful open plains of Alberta at the foothills of the Canadian Rocky Mountains. Nope. Today, I'm going to leave my responsibilities in the dust now, and I'm going to ride my horse into town and rob a bank and have a big shoot 'em up. I'll wear a bandana over my face and get my trusty six-shooter. Like, you know, unless he fell on real hard times and was super desperate, I don't think many cattle ranchers, like real working cowboys, were gunslingers, right? I think it was, you know, who knows? I mean, outlaws are outlaws. They were probably always going to be criminals, right? Cowboy coffee? No, just regular, I don't even know brand coffee it is. Although I have had the cowboy coffee before. It's not bad. It's not a bad cup of joe. But no, I just buy whatever's on sale. Whatever's on sale. But yeah, you're right. It is a thing. Cowboy coffee. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So I've got one more article here to do with the Irish in Alberta. So I think it's very, very interesting. This is a little more broadly titled Irish Immigration to Canada. Yoink. But they do in this section cover Alberta and British Columbia, which is over to the west over yonder from where I am. So, all right, let's kick this thing off here. I think you can see it. Let me just check the tubes. Yeah, looks like it's coming in okay. Hopefully you can hear me loud and clear as well, because I've been jibber-jabbering. Check, yeah. All right, here we go. And usually many of the Irish who came to live in Alberta and British Columbia during the 19th century were prosperous. They were not people of modest means, as was so often the case with earlier immigration to the eastern and mid Canada. Wait a second. They were prosperous. Okay, well, that sort of lines up with the last article, saying that the poorer of the Irish immigrants, who were more Republican Irish, moved to the States, whereas the Unionists, or, you know, British Imperial Britain sympathetic, moved to Canada. But then in that same previous article, though, it did say that, well, they weren't the firstborn sons of wealthy landowners, so they wouldn't have got the land anyway. So back in those days, how else were you going to be prosperous aside from being a landowner, unless you were some wealthy merchant or something? or a really skilled artisan of some kind, or an essential, some kind of essential service guy or gal. I don't know. It's flipping my lid for a loop-de-doo here. Oh, Billy Philly's in the house. My old friend, our old friend. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Anyways, moving on here. So from the 1870s, Calgary and other parts of southern Alberta experienced a sustained influx of ambitious and well-resourced Irishmen who hoped to become successful ranchers. Some were university graduates. That strikes me as odd because, I mean, I don't know. My granddaddy was a farmer. My dad's dad, right? They had 7 kids, 4 of whom were sons. I'm showing 3, but really I'm saying 4. 4, there we go. 4 of whom were sons. 3 out of the 4 went to university. And as soon as they were done university, off the farm they went. They're like, I don't want to be a farmer. Why do you think I went to university in the first place? So it seems odd that you would go to be a university graduate just to move all the way from Ireland, where you're from a prosperous family, prosperous enough to send you to university during the 1870s after the big Irish starvation. Then you're going to move all the way to Alberta, Canada. And Alberta, like Canada's huge, y'all. Like going from where you would land, most likely, first of all, into Canada from taking off from Ireland would probably be Newfoundland, which is the easternmost part of Canada. So from Newfoundland to Alberta is like going from New York to Denver, maybe even further. So I guess it's a good thing that they were well resourced to be able to make it all that way. Because it's not like they're hopping on the train. We didn't have a transcontinental in the 1870s. And even when the Transcontinental Railroad was finished, it didn't come to Calgary until 1886? 1886-ish? Something like that. So, I think I'm remembering that right. Yeah, 1886. I have notes. I just checked my notes for significant dates. But anyway. So it's still kind of a hinky narrative. But I guess, not all university graduates are going to go on to become, I don't know, chemists or I don't know, geologists. Some of them maybe these were animal husbandry courses offered at universities to help them with ranch life. I guess that makes sense. Anyway, a relatively large number of Irish immigrants arrived in Canada in the 1850s and 1860s. Man, that's going back a ways, man. Canada didn't become a country until 1867. So in most years, outnumbering their counterparts from England and Scotland. The likelihood is more we're heading for Western Canada, where they had access to Alberta's ranch lands and British Columbia's gold. That's right. Gold in their hills over British Columbia. And, of course, north of Alberta and British Columbia in the Yukon, right? The Klondike Gold Rush. Oh, look, there's an Irish cowboy. Of course, right? He's got his chaps on, his cowboy hat, his bandana around his neck, riding his horse. Of course. 1886, yeah. After a reset, yeah, that's a great question. And I still haven't quite zeroed in on a reset. And of course, I ascribe to the idea that there was more than one reset. There's been natural resets, naturally occurring things that have been resets that powers who should not be have sort of hooked onto, taken advantage of to propel their narrative and their agenda forward. But then after a while, as we moved into a more modern age, I think some of these powers who should not be had the ability to trigger certain events that were formerly only naturally occurring events, natural disasters or what have you, and were therefore able to cause certain man-made resets to help further their agenda, but now at their own pace. And they use numerology and all kinds of stuff, I think, to help sort of preset some of the dates of when they're going to set off the next reset. But that's kind of a long way around saying I'm not really sure, but I think, excuse me, here in southwestern Alberta, there were a couple of resets. I think one of the older resets was some kind of melting, some kind of high temperature of something, whether it was electric or had to do like UV or something that cooked parts of Alberta. We see this in the Badlands and Drumheller and Medicine Hat and Lethbridge. And if you go to Bernie's channel, he talks about that quite a bit. He's looked into that a lot more than I have. But then there's other parts of Alberta that, excuse me, that to me show evidence of some kind of earthen flood, or mud flood of some sort. And in the older neighborhoods that I explore here in Calgary, where I do my boots on the ground videos, some of the earliest neighborhoods that were established after Fort Calgary was built, we're talking, the mid 1850s, 1860s. So prior to that, and I've talked about David Thompson, who was an explorer, much like Lewis and Clark in the U.S. He explored a lot of parts of Canada, especially, again, Western Canada, and specifically around this area. In fact, there's a county here in southern Alberta called David Thompson County. And his explorations of sort of the southwestern portion of Canada almost mirrors Lewis and Clark. And it happened around the same time, just right around the Louisiana Purchase, of which a small portion on maps of what is now southern Alberta was part of the former Louisiana territories. So right around the same time as Lewis and Clark ventured westward in the United States, David Thompson did the same here in Canada, and he was working for a fur trading company. And they sent him out to explore various parts of what is now southern Alberta and southern BC and southern Saskatchewan. So I think our last reset here was prior to that, 1803 to 1805, when those guys were in this area. Say maybe 100 years prior to that, maybe. So yeah. Great question. I'm not sure exactly when. I'm going to guess somewhere around 1700-ish. And again, that's not to say that, all parts of this region were hit at the same time. There could have been some that were done in 1700 and other parts in 1800 and other parts much later, in and around 1850-ish, which is kind of one of those accepted generally widely accepted dates, ballpark-ish. It's hard to narrow these things in, right? When everything's been peppered in lies for so long. Hey, JJ saying that her great grandma is French Canadian. There you go. Well, bonjour. Getting a weird clicking through my headset here. I don't know if it's happening there on your end in the audio. Hopefully everything's sounding all right. I'm just going to double check. It sounds okay on the YouTube page, but anyway. So moving on here. What do we got? Irish homesteaders and ranchers spread themselves across vast tracts of southern Alberta. However, they were mainly concentrated to southeast Alberta. So that's in and around Fort Macleod. So the Macleod district attracted, that's sort of central Alberta-ish. East Central. I thought it was North Central, but anyway, Alberta's huge. It's the size of Texas, so it's somewhere out there. A well-heeled Ulsterman. So again, see another guy from Ulster in the 1870s and 1880s who took up ranching after having served with the Northwest Mounted Police. They had been recruited in Ireland and Ontario. So there you go. There's these in that first article where it said they were seemed to be associated with the Mounties. Well, there it is, because, a couple of guys were Mounties. So of course they're going to be associated with the Mounties when a couple of Irish immigrants are Mounties. Idiots. But anyway, various railway stations in Alberta are named after places in Ireland, suggesting an Irish past, but little data survived to confirm this. So again, just conjecture or past office history. Irish Catholics founded the St. Bride's Colony in 1927. It's located along the North Saskatchewan River in northeastern Alberta. Yes, we have a province called Alberta, and in that province, there's a river called the North Saskatchewan River, which is very confusing because we also have a province called Saskatchewan. I guess the source of the North Saskatchewan River is Alberta, but it flows to Saskatchewan. So it's been named the North Saskatchewan River because maybe it was discovered in northern Saskatchewan and then they eventually traced it to its source here in Alberta. I don't know. It's always been confusing to me, but I'm from Montreal, so what do I know? Single young men were attracted to the province by availability of railway, construction, mining, and farming jobs. So yeah, there you go. And there's a picture of a mining settlement there, and I think that's British Columbia. So yeah, we won't worry about history of British Columbia too much. We'll worry about somebody who has a channel based in Alberta. Talk about that stuff. I don't know. So yeah, kind of interesting. So they talked about the Northwest Mounted Police. So I just wanted to kind of cover a little bit of that as well. I've talked about the Mounties here before because here in Calgary was originally founded as a fort, apparently, supposedly. Fort Calgary was founded by the Mounties, or the Northwest Mounted Police, later to be what are now known as the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And yes, sometimes they're still on horseback when they patrol, city parks, or they're at the zoo, or there's big festivals. So the Northwest Mounted Police was a forerunner of the iconic Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So yeah, there you go. Created after Confederation, so after the unionization of the provinces, the first states, if you will, in Canada, right? Like the United States, the original union of a certain number of states. It's kind of like that here, with a union of a certain number of provinces joined the Confederation to sort of form a federal government, but then each province would also govern itself. Very similar to how the U.S. works. So they were formed to police the frontier territories of the Canadian West. They ended the whiskey trade on the southern prairies. Yes, those American whiskey runners, getting all of our native, indigenous, First Nations, Canadian Indians drunk on the firewater and whatever. You dirty buggers. Yeah, that old narrative too, right? Supposedly. And the violence that came with it. They helped the federal government suppress the Northwest resistance and brought order to the Klondike Gold Rush. They pioneered the enforcement of federal law in the West and in the Arctic from 1873 to 1920, and at that time they were changed to the RCMP. Okay, so they're in 1873. Canadian Parliament passed an act to establish the Mounted Police to protect the Northwest Territories, formerly known as Rupert's Land. So major swathes of Canada were known as Rupert's Land. because apparently pretty much this area here was gifted to Prince Rupert. And then once Canada, once these first few provinces joined a confederation of provinces, then we became Canada. But this area was owned by the Hudson's Bay Company, a fur trading company. And that's that company that David Thompson that I mentioned earlier worked for. And they sent him out here because he was a fur trader, but he was also an explorer and a cartographer. So they sent him out here to explore and take notes and map out the area. Supposedly for the Hudson Bay's fur trade, right? So the Northwest Territories had been purchased by Canada in 1870, all the way to Manitoba. Manitoba is just this tiny little dot on the map. Now Manitoba is a huge province. It goes all the way up here like this, and then Saskatchewan, Alberta here, and British Columbia. But anyway. So yeah, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and then the Northern Territories here, the Mounties are all spread in through here now. And in this, because again, that narrative, it was the Wild West, the rootin' tootin' Wild West. Just like old Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Yeah, calling them mounted is weird. Well, because they were mounted on horseback, right? They were kind of like cavalry. But yeah, it makes them sound odd. Oh, thank you, David. David M says the audio sounds clear and at a good volume. Thank you. Yeah, see, and that's a funny thing, right? Is the Irish, it's weird, right? Because in a very short amount of time, Irish immigrants went from being dehumanized and thought of as being subhuman, and compared to trolls and goblins that couldn't even speak English, and to within a short amount of time, within one generation, basically becoming the police force all over the place, right? Lots of Irish became cops, and yeah, that's a big narrative. Like in Gangs of New York, the movie, the Martin Scorsese movie, right? There's a couple of Irishmen that were cops. The Untouchables, right? The Irish cops in New York. Yeah. So our prime minister, that's kind of like Canada's version of a president, right? John A. Macdonald, Sir John A., I might add, our first prime minister. We wanted to have a sort of a paramilitary force that were kind of like cops to help, maintain law and order in the West. So that's how they ended up out here. So the Northwest Mounted Police was modeled after the Royal Irish Constabulary, so constables, which is what we call our Mountie police officers. They're not called, you don't call them Officer Smith or Officer O'Malley in this case, or Officer Fitzpatrick, right? They're called constable so-and-so. So there you go. Again, that association with the Northwest Mounted Police and the Irish. But again, in that very, very first article, they were very vague about it. And they were like, oh, they seem to have some kind of association. Well, duh. I mean, the very sort of model for how the Mounties were set up was based on the Irish constables. So yeah, there you go. So I thought, whoops, went crazy there for a second. So initially they were called the Northwest Mounted Rifles, but then they changed rifles to police because they didn't want to attract, arms dealers. I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, there's a lot more to be said in this article, but that pretty much is it for the Irish and Irish in Alberta and Irish association with the police. And that's funny, right? That's just a big thing. JJ says that that was your great-grandmother, right? Yeah, your great-grandmother, born in 1909. Yeah, that's a ways back. Her mother was born in Sainte Anne de la Perde, Canada in 1881. Sainte Anne de la Perde. I've never heard of that place. That's got to be either Quebec or maybe New Brunswick. But yeah, that's very interesting. Sorry, just having a sip of the coffee, but I'm not doing it the annoying in your ear, right directly in the microphone this time. Because a guy doesn't. I want to push my luck around here with you good people. So I think what I'll do here is got a little bit of a video to show as. Oh, actually, no, I lied. I'm a bold-faced liar. First, I want to share some photos of some of the Irish immigration. These are just a couple of photos that I found that are just how should I put it? Sort of the oldest photos that I could find that were specifically for Alberta and had to do with Irish settlers in Alberta. So I'll share that real quick, and then we'll take a quick little break. I've got a video to segue into talking about our trolley park here in Alberta, which has absolutely nothing to do with Ireland, St. Patrick's Day, or the mounted police. But, hey, So what do we got here? Should be seeing this, I think, hopefully. Yep. All right, good stuff. Good. So just a couple of photos. These are this is from 1881. This is just, I think they're working on irrigation, I believe, as they cleared away a lot of the treed areas, to give away more free land, apparently. They had to irrigate it, right? Because there's not actually, I joked earlier about the North Saskatchewan River here in Alberta. And of course, I live real, not far, like a couple of 100 yards off the banks of the Bow River here in Calgary. But there's really not a lot of water in Alberta. Saskatchewan has a lot more water in terms of lakes, and Manitoba does as well. And then the further east you go, of course. But Alberta is not as blessed with a lot of rivers and tributaries and that sort of thing. We have a few because we do have the glacial runoff from the Rockies, and of course all the melting snow every spring from the Rockies, but not tons, right? So they had to do a lot of irrigating, and I think that's what this was. There's a picture that we saw from, I think it was a photo in that article, but it didn't take long for this Ulsterman from Ireland here to fully immerse himself in the Wild West narrative with the rootin' tootin' cowboys. There's another photo that was that Ulsterman who was a RCMP constable. This was that little. I just took these from that article so we could kind of blow them up. It's that little mining town. And this is what you would expect to see from the wild frontier, Wild West shoot 'em up narrative in some remote location on some river, right, in some little mining town, whether it's gold mining or coal or whatever the case may be, right? This is what you'd expect to see. 1- and 2-story wooden buildings, maybe a blacksmith or a mercantile, maybe a hotel with a cafe or a saloon, and a few other businesses and some residences, maybe some feed storage, and that's it. That's it. That is it. I'm not sure when this photo was taken. Unfortunately, no date on it. I suppose I could have done a reverse Google image search, but meh, whatevs. But yeah, that's not a lot out there for photos of specifically to do with Irish settlers in Alberta, which is funny because if you just type into any image search engine on the old information superhighway, whichever one you use, and you just type in, old photos, Alberta ranches, 1880s, it's a bazillion photos come up because there was a lot of really huge cattle ranches here in Alberta. And a lot of them still exist to this day, actually. They're still in the same family, fourth, fifth generation cattle ranchers. Huge, massive cattle ranches. But then when you try to do a deep dive on getting it down to, okay, who owned these ranches? It starts to get a little bit more difficult. Especially when it's just, you can find articles, but photos, a little bit more of a challenge. Yeah. Cruz says we have an underground subway in Calgary we never used under Stephen Avenue. Kind of, sort of, yes. It's actually a City Hall station that they were going to have at City Hall. Obviously, that was supposed to be part of the C train, our LRT, light rail transit that we have here in Calgary. It's just locally known as the C train, not SEA as in sailing the seven seas, but C, like the letter C for Calgary, the Calgary train. But then they ended up changing the plans and doing a lot of cost cutting. And rather than having the train go under the ground at City Hall and do an underground City Hall station, they did it after City Hall so that it could go underneath McLeod Trail and then come back up at the Stampede grounds. Because we have Victoria Park Stampede and Earlton Stampede stations. So it was built, the concrete was poured, and everything was ready to go, and then they scrapped it. So as far as I know, there's no track down there, and it's not, an ancient, Victorian era or whatever, or, old world, undiscovered old tunnel system, with the arched, brick or anything like that. No, it's a fairly modern, built in the 80s when they put in our train system. Because, they always do that, right? They rip out the old trolleys and streetcars. And, here in the 50s, they did it. 1951, I think, was the last of it was mentioned. And then, a couple of decades later, then they put in a whole new streetcar system. And in Calgary's case, almost identical, above ground, light rail transit sort of streetcar type, almost like those European style trams that you see that run on the streets through the cities. The overhead electrical wiring, basically the same thing. Except for today, it runs down 7th Avenue, and back in the day, the old trolleys used to run down 8th Avenue, as well as other avenues. But yeah, it's goofy. But anyway, yeah, you're right. There is a station under there, and it was just never used. That's also kind of a weird narrative with our train, our LRT trains here, is they didn't do an elevated train like Chicago or New York or, Philly, these cities that have an L, right? They did it at street level. But initially they were saying that they wanted to do it as a subway below ground, like New York, London, Montreal, other cities have underground subway system. But they said that to dig underneath downtown was too cost prohibitive, and there was too much bedrock, and there would have to be too much dynamiting and drilling, and it was going to be too expensive. So they basically opted to put the downtown line at street level on 7th Avenue, which runs in an easterly, westerly direction, back and forth, east to west. But I think it's because there's a lot of stuff under the city. I think there's some of the old world buildings that are in the downtown core. These old world looking brick and sandstone 5, 6, 7 floor buildings, a lot of which I've already explored on this channel with my boots on the ground videos. I think some of them go down some floors. And as a result, the problem would have been that, well, now we've got to explain all of these, 1 or 2, or maybe even in some cases 3 floors that are underground that at one point used to be above ground. So I think they just scrapped the whole idea and just decided to run the train along the road. That's just my hypothesis. And then they used the excuse that it was too difficult and therefore too cost prohibitive. But I know that there is stories of tunnels under downtown, one of which is a story of a tunnel that goes from the Palliser Hotel on 9th Avenue downtown to the Grain Exchange building, which is sort of caddy corner, however you want to say it, diagonally across a city block from it, where there was apparently in the quote-unquote basement, there was a speakeasy that you could access through this underground tunnel that went from the basement of the Palliser Hotel to the basement of the Grain Exchange building, which is, I think, a 5 or 6 story building, old world building, and apparently a hidden speakeasy down there. So I've heard multiple stories of that from different sources, but I haven't seen any physical evidence or any proof. I've just heard there's just stories, myth, whatever, right? But it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah, Penny Lane. Penny Lane was a beautiful. I remember Penny Lane. I remember going in there when it was still there before they tore it down. That was a beautiful old world building as well that was used as an arcade, right? Not what we modern day, what we called arcade, like in the 70s and 1980s, with video games. Arcade in terms of penny arcade and, 5 and dime shops and that sort of thing. And that's what it was. It was like a mall before malls. And beautiful brick and sandstone. And they tore that down in the 80s, I believe. And erected, of course, some big concrete and glass monstrosity in its place. Terrible. But yeah, Penny Lane was beautiful. Actually, I have a couple of old photos of Penny Lane. Yeah, Tampa, having tunnels. Yeah, England, tons of tunnels in England, all over England. Not just specifically London, but everywhere. I've seen lots of channels that explore tunnels underneath all sorts of cities in England and in the US. Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that some of the levels have been repurposed. And that's sort of how they explain it. Yeah, a lot of the same stories. And, that's where you get like basement and sub-basement and sub-basement. I used to work at a store downtown that is actually on 8th Avenue or Stephen Avenue, that historic district. And it's the old Eaton's, I believe, which was a major department store started in the 1800s here in Canada. I think it's the old Eaton's building. But anyways, it had 2 sub-basements and then a basement. I'm like, really, what do you need? Like, if you're going to put the boiler and the furnace and the hot water tank and all the services for the building, the dynamo or the generator and all that stuff down there, for the essential stuff for the building, heat and water and air exchange and all that. If you're going to put that in the basement, then why do you need 2 sub-basements? Because there was also the loading dock, which was down in the basement also. So the 2 sub-basements seemed awfully redundant. And they were used as, storage and stock rooms, because it was a It was a big clothing store that I worked for that had menswear, ladies' wear, shoes, luggage. It was like a small, I guess, like a department store in a lot of ways. So they had stock rooms down there, and there's staff lunchroom, and meeting rooms and managers' offices and all that bit, right? So yeah, it seemed awfully redundant to have that many sub basements and then an actual basement. I mean, in modern buildings, sure, because you get these 90-story skyscrapers that need like massive basements, right? Where they got to go down like 100 feet and have these huge, massive basements to help support the structure. But these old world buildings that are, 4 floors or 6 or 7 floors, I mean, you don't have to go down 100 feet. I mean, I'm not, no builder or anything, but logic would say the taller the building, the deeper the foundation. So if your building's not really that tall to begin with, why does your foundation need to be just as deep as your building is tall, basically, or almost? Oh yeah, you gotta watch that stuff. Gotta watch that stuff, David. Yeah. I've been hollered at a couple times by people. One of them was actually, speaking of army and the police and stuff, I was shooting video around the Mawada Armory here in Calgary, which, these buildings that look like castles in the middle of a city. So they're designated as an armory for the local military, the army, right? In this case, the Canadian Army. And I was just filming, and I didn't realize that I had wandered into a section that had said, that it was private and no trespassing, because it was just a sign. It wasn't roped off or fenced off, because it's a designated historical building. So you're allowed on some of the grounds, right? Especially on the front, public access. But I had wandered off to the side and then around the back, and then some soldier in a beret and fatigues came out and kind of hollered at me a bit. And I'm like, take it easy, dude, man. Like, I'm just here filming this beautiful old building. You don't have to holler at a guy. It's not a way to win the hearts and minds there, buddy. So yeah, you got to watch that. I've been yelled at just on the sidewalk taking video of some old building. Some guy came out hollering at me, and I'm like, buddy, I'm on the sidewalk, so I can film. It's public property. I can film anything that passes into my field of view as I'm scanning while I'm standing on public property. I can film it, buddy. I'm sorry. Like, it's not like I'm peeping in your window, weirdo. So I think now's as good a time as any. Speaking of, Calgary and the trams and underground train stations that were never fully realized, I think it's a good time to take a quick break, and we'll segue into this video that I've got here of the tram system, or the streetcar system here in Calgary, taking folks out to the just gotta remember, make sure I'm queuing up the right one. We'll take folks out to the end of the line of the streetcar. To the park. And again, not like a big Luna Park, although there were amusement rides and so on there, but it was very typically Canadian. And what I mean by that, you'll see, but what I mean by that is very outdoorsy, right? You picture Canada and, the trees and the lakes and the vast expanse of land and so on and so forth. I mean, we're bigger than the US, but we have a tenth of the population, right? There's only about 37 million people here in Canada, but Canada's almost as big as Rusky land over there, right? In terms of millions of square miles. So not a lot of folks around here. So, Canadians tend to do, I mean, most of Canada is still, crammed into the big cities, of course, but Canadians typically like to do a lot of outdoorsy stuff: camping, fishing, hunting, hiking, kayaking, and canoeing, and boating, and, just all that outdoorsy stuff. And I, myself, personally, guilty as charged, right? So this little video here kind of shows these trolley parks, or this trolley park that we had in Calgary up until I think the early 60s. I mean, it's still there, but the streetcar doesn't run there anymore, right? So I'm going to share, I'm going to share this little vignette, a quick little video, like I said, that I found on the HooTubes, and it's from PBS.
Perhaps the most popular destination to ride a Calgary streetcar was to the end of the line, up the valley west of town, to the deluxe suburb of Bowness, advertised as the ideal spot to build a home in the most sought-after residential area of Calgary. The visionary behind the project was John Hextall, who spent $55,000 on an iron bridge to provide access to the property. The bridge helped, but Hextall still needed to attract more people to his development if he wanted to sell all the lots. So, in 1912, Hextall made the city of Calgary a proposition. He would donate 2 islands in the middle of the Bow River as a city park if the city would run a street railway line to Bowness. The city agreed, and streetcars began running that summer to a lovely oasis at the end of the line called Bowness Park.
It picked up a lot of speed. It was going through prairie grass to get out there in those days. And the thing whipped back and forth, and the motorman stood astride, and he was just like riding a horse. It was quite an experience. If you get back in the smoker or someplace back there, the hind end was whipping around, and they were great fun.
Well, it was a treat just to go to Bowness Park and buy an ice cream cone there.
Paul Dufoux is one of the many Calgarians who remembers that half the fun of going to Bowness Park was getting there.
Bowness Park was the park that was quite a distance away, and the only way that you could get there was by streetcar. And I remember you had to pay 2 tickets. One ticket to get to Shoaldice Park, which is part way, and then another ticket to get to Bowness Park.
There was a feeling of freedom because you could walk all kinds of paths. You could sit and just watch the fountain. And in the evening, the colors, they had lights, I guess, to make the fountain light up. There was a smell of, I'm not sure that it was hamburgers, but there was maybe a Coney Island type smell about it, because you could buy ice cream and things like that there. And of course the sounds were children laughing, playing, and the merry-go-round.
Perhaps the most unique feature of Bowness Park was the lagoon, a backwater of the Bow River, where a fountain lit by colored lights caused a rainbow-colored mist to dance through the air.
And people could canoe. Prue remembers that because I ran her into the fountain one day. I think
talking,
trying to show off as a young swain.
Well, no, we were just, there were 4 of us in the canoe, I think, and we just were talking so much that we, and it just rode right into, or paddled right into it, and got quite soaked. I've never let him live it down.
Little light dusting of water.
But no.
In the middle of the lagoon, there was a building that was almost like an enclosed gazebo. And certainly on weekends and probably on summer afternoons, they played concert music, a series of recordings for maybe 2 hours. And you always knew when it was about to start, because whoever spun the turntables was rowing his way over to the gazebo. And the music came, as I recall, they called it an orthophonic. And it was pretty pleasant to be sitting out there on the banks of the lagoon and listening to nice music and no advertisements. Nice way to spend an afternoon.
John Hextall never lived to see his dream of creating a special place for his fellow Calgarians come true. When World War I broke out in 1914, he took off to join the fighting in Europe, and he never came home. Bowness, the ideal spot to build a home, was annexed into the city of Calgary in 1964. The iron bridge Hextall built to bring people to Bowness still exists at Shoaldice, and Bowness Park is still there too. Walk across the middle of the blacktop area near the Park Cafe, and you can see the outline of where the bandstand used to be. Walk through the grass on the edge of the amusement area, and you can see where the youngsters used to buy their tickets and ride the carousel. Gaze across the lagoon, and you can see where the orthophonic used to play classical music throughout the park. The swimming pool has been filled in, but you can still walk the grounds of the old park where cattle used to graze. The miniature railroad that was installed in 1953 still runs through the park today, and good memories continue to be made at a special place called Bowness Park. It is still possible to ride the Bowness Carousel, too, but you have to do that in Heritage Park, where the old merry-go-round was moved in 1985.
I still go on the merry-go-round out at Heritage Park when I get there. It's, it's just something that kids do. You know, you pick your horse, whether it's white or brown or black. I never liked to sit on the benches. I always liked to ride the horse. But it was great. I really liked it.
All right. So there you go. Bowness Park in its heyday. In its heyday. Yeah. Gross is saying, laugh out loud. Lols. He's lolling. Lols, Bowness. Sought after. Lols. I've heard it all now. Yeah, because Bowness as a neighborhood now, at least in terms of local Calgarians, is not exactly known as a well sought after neighborhood. It's an older neighborhood, but because it's older and quite far removed away from the downtown core, as we saw in that little video, as was the idea for developing it in the first place, because it's kind of out of the way, but kind of old, it just kind of got run down, I guess. Whereas in some of the older neighborhoods that are much closer to the downtown core, which generally is what happens when a city is first developing, so to speak, right? You know, the older a city gets, the sprawl stretches out, and you end up with the suburbs that are, miles outside of downtown or whatever. But like where I live is one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city, and it's not really run down that much at all. In fact, most of the really first, I would say the first 2 or 3 neighborhoods that developed as residential areas after the fort was established and Calgary started to, become a town and then later a city. They're all very, very close to downtown, and they're all in really beautiful shape. Like Inglewood is lovely, and I'll take the camera out there for a mud flood tour of Inglewood in the summer once all the snow melts and the temperature warms up quite a bit, because there's a lot of beautiful stuff out in Inglewood to see. But yeah, for some reason Bowness just became kind of rough, shall we say, which is too bad, because had they kept the old trolley system, the old electric streetcar system up and running over that beautiful old bridge into Bowness, and had Mr. Hextall not died in World War I, who knows, right? It may have been a beautiful, luxurious neighborhood with Bowness Park as its sort of the jewel in the crown, and they could have maybe continued to expand that park and add more stuff to it, and maybe it would still be running much in the same way today as it was then, with a lot more rides and amusements, because it was connected to the trolley system, right? Whereas now it's just a park in the middle of a neighborhood in the city, that just happens to be on the banks of the river. And the park itself is beautiful. I go there quite often, and I've been on that little miniature train quite a few times, as you would guess. Old Frankie loves his trains, right? So that miniature train is a real kick. But unfortunately, its heyday is long gone. But I did manage to find some photos of Bowness Park in its heyday. So I thought maybe what we'd do is I would share some of those with you real quick. And most of these photos are going to be from the 20s up until about the 50s, mid 50s. I think 1920, I want to say 1921 or 22 until about the mid 50s. So yeah, let's have a look at some of these that I found here. So here's the swimming lagoon, and that's too bad that it's not there anymore, right? And there's, of course, you see all the people in their one-piece bathing suits, right? Everybody's all modest, right? Don't want you to see all my bits. So long before the days of the bikini, but obviously very popular. I mean, it's not like a beautiful sandy beach or anything like that. It's just, you can see it's a stone sort of shoreline here in this lagoon that comes off the river that's here in the background. But they have a slide, and then there's, you know, ramps and stairs to come down into the lagoon. And of course, you get all the weirdos that don't want to participate, standing around watching. But you can see the setting in the background is beautiful. Now, this is all developed now. This is all neighborhood with houses and little strip malls and gas stations and 7-Elevens and all that crap. But you could see back in the day why this would be a favorite destination on a weekend at the end of the trolley line. You know, beautiful natural setting. This photo is after this portion of the park was closed, but they hadn't removed this old building yet. But this is where they used to have dancing. Obviously, they'd have live music, and it was a big dance hall. It's a fairly modern picture, but yeah, there's that little Canadian Pacific miniature train that I love so much and have been on a couple times. It's kind of a tiny photo. You'll have to excuse the quality, but this is the Shouldice family. And their Shouldice Park is here, named after them. And they're skating. There's that bridge that this guy put in on his own dime to coax the city into expanding the trolley line out to his park to develop it. A pretty, you know, if it had, in my opinion, had it worked out for him, it was a pretty wise move. I don't know why the hell this horse and buggy are on here. When look out now, there's a streetcar coming. But it was Christmas 1912. There you go. So right when the bridge was just freshly erected, here it is today. It still stands, which is nice. Pedestrian bridge, obviously. But see, how the hell is that horse and buggy getting across the bridge at the same time as this trolley when it's only yay wide? I don't know. Does that seem hanky? Seems hanky. But there's a glorious old trolley or streetcar, electric streetcar. You can see it's the above electric line. But beautiful, beautiful old streetcar. The fancy schmancy canopy on it. Obviously, this is one that's, you know, its destination is Bowness. It says right there, Bowness Park on it. 1 hour seen Calgary fare, 25 cents. Wow, you could ride this thing for an hour for 25 cents. That's pretty neat. Of course, when was this photo taken? Not entirely sure, but it looks like it was a while back. Of course, you get all your cowboys on here, getting ready to go out to Bowness Park. There's another nice shot. This is where the trolley used to make a turn and then head out towards Bowness. This is after it went over the 10th Street Bridge, which is still there, into Kensington, which I believe this is the neighborhood known as Kensington. And this is, I believe, 10th Street, and then this road here is Kensington Road, I believe. So it turns here and heads into Bowness. Nice looking trolley there too. I love the old trolleys. Very efficient way to get around. There's a shot from the 40s with that little mini train. Different train then than now, but 40s or 50s. Maybe 50s, judging by the hair and clothing. 1950s as well. Kind of blurry here, but you can see boat rides in Bowness Park, so in the lagoon. These are little kiddie rides, right? So this is it. It follows a predestined loop around this little portion of the lagoon here. So the kids aren't actually driving it, but that's fun. I remember stuff like this when I was a kid. There's another nice shot of the swimming area. This is 1920s, so again, everybody all modest, but you can see it looked like a lot of fun, right? You could just go down the slides, and you can see all the cool jalopies and cars parked there in the background. Again, beautiful natural wooded area as a setting. Very relaxing. Look at that. Royal Scot miniature train in the 1940s. Look at that, baby. Really neat. Love that. It even has a little bell. Fantastic. There's just as many adults riding this thing as there are kids, of course. This is a shot from the, I believe, the 60s. Late 50s, very early 60s. You can see for a while there was, there's that carousel or merry-go-round that's been moved to Heritage Park. This, I think, has been moved to Heritage Park as well. The Ferris wheel. You can see there's a bunch of rides all in here. So they had a nice little midway going and concessions, and it was, in the summer. Obviously in the winter, this would all be shut down, except for ice skating and that sort of thing. But in the summer and on the weekends and stuff, this would have been great. You take the trolley, you get here, you could relax, you could ride a few rides, go for a swim, go for a boating ride. I think they had horseback riding here too, because remember, this is out in the country now. There's another nice shot. So I think it's early 50s, Bowness Park. Of course, I mean, a road went out there as well, so you could just drive out to the park. They had cabins there that you could rent by the night, the weekend, the week, or even by the month. So, it was something that a lot of Calgarians did in the summer on a long weekend, let's say, is they would drive out to Bowness Park and rent a nice little cabin along the banks of the river there and just enjoy a long weekend in nature and maybe go boating, swimming, and sure, hit some rides and stuff. Why not? And not much else to do in Bowness Park in the winter, but obviously skating a big thing amongst us Canadians in the wintertime. So, make the best of those long, cold winters. It's another shot of some of the canoes and boats you could rent. I wonder why they need this little doodad on top of some wooden 2-story boathouse. Oh, anyway. It's another shot, I think, very similar to that. But there's where you can get your boats. There's where you could change into your bathing suit and come on out and frolic. Is there a date on this? No, Kitty's Bathing Pool, Bowness Park. No date. I think this is obviously early to mid-20s, judging by the jalopies. So there's that ornithonium, as they refer to it, just in the middle of the lagoon with the fountain in Bowness Park. So a fountain in a lagoon that shoots water, and then they run some electricity in there, so they have different colored lights that shine off the mist in the evening. I could see how that would be lovely, sure, and that would make sense. But this seems odd, doesn't it? Like, let's just build a gazebo in the middle of the lagoon so we can play music. I mean, the music is nice. They play classical music and waltzes, nice relaxing music while you're out paddling around in your canoe, but that just seems so weird. So I don't know, was that there before? And then when Mr. Hextall bought the land and dammed up some of the, or rerouted some of the Bow River into this to form this lagoon. Was this already there? It got flooded? I don't know. Also, does that look like a doodad on top, or is that just a tree in the background? I don't know. It's too pixelated. Sorry. Another nice shot. I think this is one of the concession stands. Cool old car there. Late 40s, early 50s. Chevy? Pontiac, maybe? Yeah. Oh, and there's that video. Yeah, okay, so there we go. So that is Calgary's old trolley park. But as mentioned, very, very Canadian, very outdoorsy. Lots of rides and stuff. And again, some of those rides were transported from Bowness Park to Heritage Park. And still working today, along with some of those old streetcars or trolleys as well. But yeah, very typically Canadian, not like a big Luna Park like you would see in the States or other parts of the world. Not really sure why. Maybe because Western Canada is a much smaller market and much more further removed. I'm not sure if there were Luna Parks out east, like in Toronto or Montreal, or I'm sure there were, because they had much more expansive streetcar or trolley systems in those bigger cities. Like Toronto had a huge trolley network. So I would imagine that there were trolley parks and maybe even a branded Luna Park. Maybe. I honestly haven't looked into it. But I know that this Bowness Park was privately owned, privately run. Let's check out the chat here. See what everybody's talking about. Still talking about underground stuff. Yeah, weird. Oh yeah, the miniature trains. Yeah, love those. They're fantastic. David M. once again saying, glad I subbed to your channel. Well, I'm glad you did as well. Thank you. He says, glad I subbed to your channel. Seems like we both are very interested in trains. Yeah, I love old trains, especially the old steam trains. Once they went to, electric diesel and that sort of thing, not so much. Maybe in the 30s and the 40s, maybe up into the 50s, those electric diesel trains looked kind of cool, when they started streamlining them. But really, I'm more into the old coal and wood-fired boiler steam engine trains, right? The stuff from the 1860s, 1870s, that sort of thing. That's kind of what I'm more interested in. I put a lot of videos up on the channel of just old footage that I find of these old steam trains from if I could find footage, the older the better, right? But, from the 20s or the teens or the aughts, in and around the turn of the last century. I try to keep it Canadian content too. I try to keep it CP Rail, Canadian Pacific Rail, or CN, Canadian National Railway, if I can, or American Railways that came up into Canada too, right? Like something like Union Pacific they would come up in through Toronto and Montreal and that sort of thing. Joe Cool says they still use electric trolleys in Tampa. See, I didn't know that. I know that they use trolleys in San Francisco. Those are probably the most famous, right? When people think of streetcars, at least for me, and probably I could speak for most Canadians at least anyways, when we hear streetcar, we think of San Francisco, which is a different system. It's not the overhead electric cable, as from what I understand, but it's the underground. It's a tow cable, if I'm not mistaken. But still, yeah. I didn't know Tampa had trolleys. So they pretty much did away with all the old trolley systems here in all the big cities in Canada. Like even Montreal, like even old Montreal, which that entire old port area of Montreal that encompasses quite a few square blocks of old Montreal, is designated as a World Heritage Site, yada, yada, yada. And even that doesn't have the old trolley system or streetcar system in it anymore. They just have the underground metro that has a couple of stations in old Montreal, and that's it. But like Toronto's is gone, Quebec City's is gone. Regina and Saskatoon had nice ones. They're gone. Calgary's is gone. Edmonton. Vancouver had a really big one too. It's gone. It's very unusual because they've all been replaced. Well, first they were replaced by diesel buses, right? Or electric cable buses. Vancouver has the electric cable buses. Toronto maybe as well. I'm not sure about Toronto. But anyway. And then a lot of these cities went back to a on street level, like above ground, street level, light rail transit, electric, overhead electric cable system, like kind of like they use in Europe. If you look at, I don't know, cities in like Norway or Sweden or wherever, all over Europe and Poland and stuff, right? They have these light rail transit on street level. And they have stations, and you just go to the station, buy your ticket, and get on. So they basically killed the old system, and a couple of decades later, replaced it with almost the identical same system. Doesn't make any sense to me. Oh, of course. Oh, you got to have Snoopy. It says the mini train here has Snoopy in the little window. Yeah, you got to have Snoopy in there. So, Joe, do they have Trolley Park then in Tampa? Or I'm sure they, at some point, they used to have a trolley park in Tampa, but do they still? Oh, so it was the overhead cable. Oh, okay, gotcha. Turtle's here. Just trying to sneak in. Good to see you. Welcome. He says, I'm close to Gettysburg. Lots of mud flood, but yeah, I would imagine so. Oh, and so, yeah, he says, Turtle says we also have little parks like those today, but no trolleys anymore. Yeah, see, I don't know. I think the trolleys would be fun. I think the trolleys would be, like that old style. I mean, sure, I get it. You can't ride the damn thing for 25 cents anymore. Sure, I get it. I mean, unless they reestablish some of the old Antiquitech and how that worked, then maybe, there wouldn't be any cost because you would just produce electricity or gather electricity or amplify gathering electricity for free. And you just run everything off of that free energy. And, so it doesn't really cost anything to run the trolleys or to ride the trolleys. Maybe you have some people pay a nominal fee just for maintenance of the trolley itself, wear and tear on it, right? And maintenance of the tracks and stuff. But even today, that fee would be nominal. Is there a monorail in Canada? I don't know. I don't think so. There may have been one in Montreal for Expo 67. There may have been a monorail there, very similar to like Disneyland's monorail, kind of, I guess. But as terms of an actual functioning monorail, I don't know. I don't think so. I could be wrong on that, but I'm not entirely sure. Well, Joe says, not sure if there's a trolley park, something new to look into. Gee, thanks, Frankie. Well, yes. My pleasure, sir. My pleasure. I would imagine. I mean, if there isn't one now, it's Tampa, pretty good sized city. Florida, we know from old world maps, has been there forever. I mean, Florida's marked on maps as Florida pre-Columbian maps, supposedly. So, old world source maps have Florida being called Florida. So, I mean, it's been there a long time. So, there's a lot of history in and around Florida. So who knows? I would imagine that Tampa probably did have one at one point. But see, I'm surprised they didn't put a golf course at Bowness Park here in the city. Maybe at some point during the golf course building craze here in and around Calgary and close to the Rocky Mountains, right, like Banff and stuff, there was a huge let's build golf courses craze in the late 80s through to the sort of the early 2000s, right? Like they put a golf course and then they build a neighborhood or a subdivision of some suburban neighborhood out there, and the golf course would be sort of the central part of the neighborhood or the community. And of course they'd put in, like everything else, strip malls and all that stuff too. And I'm surprised at some point during that time frame they didn't try to put a golf course in Bonus Park. Maybe at some point it was proposed, I don't know. But it's funny how in just a couple of decades it goes from being a trolley park with swimming and boating and amusement park rides and all that stuff, and then cabins to go camping and hiking trails and horseback riding and all that. Then now it's a nice park, and they still have the little train. They still have boating, but that's it. The swimming's gone. The amusement park's gone. So, yeah. Okay, David's saying that Expo 67 did have one. And then Cairo and a few other countries have them now. Yeah, I think Japan has messed around experimenting with them, but has found that they're not very efficient. So they have a one or two, but not that many. And I want to say that France maybe toyed around with doing a monorail too. I'm not sure. Something to look into though, for sure. So what's going on here? I've been creeping up on 2 hours. Wow, can a guy ever blab and blab? I think I've pretty much covered everything here. We covered Bonus Park, Calgary's old trolley park. We looked at some photos and video for the trolley park. What else did we look at? We looked at the Mounties and, of course, talked about Irish for, St. Patrick's Day. Talked about Irish in Alberta and how closely tied they are to formerly the Northwest Mounted Police, the Mounties, now the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They got their royal designation, by the way, when I think it was during some highfalutin monarch in England's Jubilee celebration of some kind, or some highfalutin monarch's crowning or something. I don't know, passing the torch of imperial power, whatever. The Mounties went actually over there as part of the big ceremony and the pomp and circumstance, and did what's now famous, the Mountie musical ride, where it's like, I think it's 50 mounted policemen on horseback wearing the traditional red coat uniforms with the navy blue pants, the yellow stripe down the side, and the wide brimmed hat there. And they do a sort of like a synchronized show with the horses to music, with the bagpipes and the whole bit. So I think they did that over there for some highfalutin celebration, I think in the 19 teens, maybe after the war, or in the 20s or something, maybe. I don't know, something to do with maybe King George V or King Edward, one of them cats. I don't know. Anyways, this British monarch, was so impressed that he bestowed upon them the royal title of the Royal Northwest Mounted Police, and then later the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So, so fancy. Thanks, Your Highness. Whatever. Oh, David says he's been on one in Japan. Oh, okay, there you go. Man, you're bebopping and scatting all over the realm, right? Been to Japan, you're heading over to Montreal to do some work over there. That's pretty cool. So I think a guy's getting ready to shut her down here pretty quick. Just going to see if anybody has any questions in the chat for me before I pull the plug on this thing here for today. But before I do that, of course, I'll give you a second to type in anything any questions you have for me. But before that, again, just a reminder that creeping up on 1,000 subs. And I'm not one of these guys that, talks about subscribing very often because we all know, right? Everybody and their mom puts up a video on YouTube and asks you to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon to be notified when they always upload new content, yada, yada. We all know that, right? We don't need to be told like we're a bunch of numbskulls to constantly like and subscribe and all that. So I don't bother to ask. I usually just ask you to do the YouTube things. You know what that means. But I am asking, again, if you're on the fence, and if you're warming up to a crazy guy out here in Calgary, Alberta, and if you're on the fence for subscribing, please consider. Because once I hit that 1,000 subscriber mark, I am going to be hosting a meetup. And as I mentioned earlier in the stream, and as we touched on talking about the trolleys and streetcars in Calgary, I want to do a meetup on Stephen Avenue, which is 8th Avenue. Formerly the sort of the main line for the downtown section of the trolley system. And there's about 10 city blocks there that have been designated as a historical site, city and provincial, and I think federal, like Canadian historical site. Lots of old world buildings there, beautiful red brick, sandstone, and granite, and marble, just beautiful stuff. So want to arrange a meetup to celebrate that 1,000 subscribers as a thank you to all of you for your support. And, maybe a beer or a coffee or a slice of pizza or something on me. And however many of us want to meet out there, we'll start sort of on the west end of Stephen Avenue, 8th Avenue, right where the good stuff kind of begins. And we'll make our way eastward towards basically what is kind of Center Street-ish, close McLeod Trail, really, which is where City Hall is. So definitely plan on doing that, and hopefully I hit that benchmark sometime in the late spring, early summer even, where the weather is nice and people can come and meet up. I know Bernie's going to want to join, and there's quite a few people that live here in Calgary that have subscribed to the channel and pop in and comment and show their support quite often. So maybe we can get, I don't know, half a dozen people or 10 people out there would be great. The more the merrier, of course. And a couple of other field trips planned for this summer. Heritage Park, as mentioned in the video we watched earlier today, and I made reference to quite a few times here over the past year and a half or so here on the channel, give or take. So I'll take you out there. I'll take the camera out there and do kind of a tour of Heritage Park, because, while it's an amusement park based on 1900 in Calgary, what Calgary was like in 1900. So it is like an indoctrination center in a sense, but it's still very interesting. And the beautiful buildings that were basically lifted up, slapped onto the flatbed and moved out to Heritage Park and then dropped down in there. And they set it up like a small prairie town in 1900. There's a blacksmith and a hotel and a saloon and all the Wild West shoot 'em up stuff you'd expect. Plus a bunch of old steam trains, the streetcar trolleys there. Some of the rides from the trolley park are there. There's an old steam-powered paddle boat on the reservoir out there. So that's going to be fantastic. I'm really looking forward to when the weather warms up, taking you out there. That'll be great. You can get into the park by riding the steam engine from the 1890s. Chug, chug, toot, toot, into the park. And then once you get into the park, there's a few stations with the steam train before it gets to the main terminus. But then there's also that electric streetcar that runs through the town that they built there at the park too. So yeah, that's going to be great. Really cool. Fort Calgary, which we also talked about, founded by the Mounties, the Northwest Mounted Police here in Calgary in the 1870s, I want to say. Sorry, the exact date escapes me, but it's now, a museum and a public park area. So again, once the weather gets nice, I'll take you out there. We'll take a tour of the grounds, see if we can see anything hanky going on with those old buildings that were built out there in the 1800s. And then we'll go inside and take a tour of the information center and the museum that's in there. It's very interesting. Then I also want to take you to Inglewood in the summer as well. That's actually widely known as Calgary's oldest neighborhood. And that is just east of Fort Calgary, just on the other side of the Elbow River. and beautiful opportunity to do a great mud flood walking tour of that neighborhood, as well as a bunch of other goodies. Like maybe a guy will take you up to Edmonton, our capital city up there, and we'll take a look at some cool stuff that we've already done Google Map drops on here on the channel and some live streams. But we'll go up there and do some real life in the flesh, boots on the ground stuff. Like we'll look at the old legislature grounds and some of the old world structures out there. And of course, I will continue to do boots on the ground here in the older parts of Calgary, exploring, checking out potential mud flood evidence. Lots of stuff to see here. Even I continue to surprise myself as to what I'm finding out here, because again, according to the narrative, there was nothing out here but cattle ranches, cowboys, and wild Indians and teepees and buffalo, until, they started with the big give away some land and the railroad came in and, all that stuff, and the Mounties with the building the fort and all that. Prior to that, there's supposed to be nothing out here, but I'm surprised at how old some of these structures look and just how amazing they are. Stuff that just doesn't fit the narrative of a small prairie town out in the middle of nowhere, right on the fringes of the wild frontier in the New West here in Canada. So yeah, definitely looking forward to continuing the boots on the ground video uploads. Those are every Sunday. Come hell or high water, people. Sundays, boots on the ground. Unless it's been cold for a month straight and I can't get out there. But definitely every Sunday, something's going up. Generally boots on the ground. And then every Wednesday, midweek video, again, some cool vintage footage of old trains, or I don't know, old Canadian footage of stuff set to music. And again, once a month, usually mid-month, live stream. I'll try maybe I'll try and do these live streams more often. It's just hard to lock down a time because I don't have a set schedule at work. So it's that's why my live streams are on a different day all the time. But yeah, we'll play around with it. We'll see how it goes. And as mentioned earlier, going to continue to build up the online presence, if you will. I'm not into like Twitter and Insta and all that stuff, but definitely we'll do some backup channels, maybe on like BitChute and Rumble and that sort of thing. So keep your peepers peeled and your earballs tuned. Your earballs, I don't know, tuned in for that stuff. So yeah, more great stuff to come as always. So, I really appreciate all the support since about June of 2021 when I kind of started this thing here. So thank you very much. I really appreciate all of you and all of your support, all of your encouragement. Ooh, I just bumped my camera. Careful now. Guys getting overzealous with the thank yous and the appreciation. But sincerely, I really, really appreciate all the support. Thank you very much to all my mods, everybody who comments in the videos, people that share the stuff. That's great. That's what I like the most, is the interaction, the comments, and we can get maybe a thread going in the comment section or on a stream like this. It's great. I love the discussions that everybody's been having here today on the live stream, talking about all kinds of stuff like underground tunnels and old train stations underground, how they used to dispose of the old streetcars, like basically just dump them in the rivers or dump them in landfills or just drag them out to the woods and leave them to rust. It's heartbreaking. Oh, and geez, a guy almost forgot. I made a promise a couple streams ago that every live stream that I would do a sneak peek of an upcoming video upload. So how about a guy does that before we sign off for the day here? How about I just find something that we can have a nice little peekaboo at that I can share with you. Just as a little sneak peek as to what to expect maybe in the next week or so on the channel here. So you see, it pays off to kind of jump in on these streams once in a while. And again, I appreciate it because I know it's a weird time of day. For most people, it's kind of early in the day on a Friday. So a lot of you might be at work or what have you. So again, I appreciate you visiting and shooting in on a guy on a weird time here. But yeah, let's see what we've got for a nice... oh yeah, here's a nice one. Actually, this one, I've got some old world structures from Calgary from a bygone era. nice little photo. This isn't video, unfortunately, because there's not a lot of old video out there of Calgary, but some old photos from late 1880s to mid 1920s, 1926-ish, give or take, of just some beautiful old world buildings here in Calgary. Some that remain, some that unfortunately have been razed to the ground. But let's cue this baby up and have a little look-see at this here. I think this should work, hopefully. Okay, I think you can see that. Yeah, looks like that's coming in okay. Excuse me, folks. Amateur hour here at New West Reset. I just want to make sure I have it queued up properly and everything. All right, so here we go. This is some old school stuff from a bygone era in Calgary.
When I'm fighting to get back to the first time, the feel of that very first hit. And I've tried to get by with the rush of a high, but I keep coming up short of it. I should guess up and go seek my fortune, but my 4 times on frozen in place. Petrified here with a spliff and a beer, and the memory of your wooden face. Lay down and die right beside me. If you find me beneath all the snow, gone and search for my bones in Alberta. It's the last place that I'll ever know. No. Since you left me for dead in Grand Prairie, ribs sticking out of my skin. Stuck in the road, I was true to the bone and appalled at the shape that I was in. Won't you lay down and die right beside me? If you find me beneath all the snow, go and search for my bones in Alberta, 'cause that's the last place that I'll ever know. It's the last place that I'll ever know. There we go. Come on. Gas up. Get on down. Gin filled home on the inside, where goodbye ran a nail to my chest. Slow and melodic, destruction methodic, it's the only way I'll ever rest. I should gas up and go seek my fortune, but my 4 times are frozen in place. Petrified here with a spliff and a beer, and the memory of your pretty face. Lay down and die right beside me. If you find me beneath all the snow, go and search for my bones in Alberta, 'cause that's the last place that I'll ever know. Won't you lay down and die right beside me? If you find me beneath all this goddamn snow, won't you search for my bones in Alberta, 'cause it's the last place that I'll ever know. Yeah, that's the last place that I'll ever know. This is the last place that I'll ever know. This is the last place I'll ever know.
All right. So there you go. A sneak peek at probably what's going to be coming up next, probably on Wednesday, actually. This coming Wednesday. Joe Cool, say nice jam. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Turtle, love the music. Yes, I got to give props. I mean, the info comes up on the bottom in the description or under the description when the video uploads as to who it is. But that is Big Sugar, I believe. No, could be Grady. Either one. It's both those bands were fronted by they're Canadian bands, both fronted by a guy named Gordie Johnson. Excellent guitar player, quite a good singer, kind of bluesy rock, country rock, a little bit, kind of few influences, mostly blues, country, and rock, all kind of mixed together very, very nicely. And yeah, I tend to use Canadian music when I can, if I can, with that type of video upload. I like Big Sugar, I use them, or Grady, as mentioned. Basically 2 bands by Gordie. And speaking of Gordie, the late great, may he rest in peace, of the Tragically Hip, Gord Downie, Mr. Gord Downie. And Tragically Hip is another Canadian band that I use a lot in my videos. So yeah, it's the Hip, Grady, or Big Sugar generally. Sometimes I'll throw Wilf Carter in there. He's a country and western singer that was born in Nova Scotia, Canada, and moved out here to Calgary in the 1920s to become a real cowboy. He competed in the Calgary Stampede and worked on ranches as a cowhand, cattle rancher, and then became a professional rodeo cowboy and competed in the rodeo circuit, the Calgary Stampede and other rodeos. Then he became a singing cowboy, like, Gene Autry and all them, but legit though, like a real cowboy. Recorded a bunch of records, singing, songs about cowboy life, cowboy songs. And a lot of it has Canadian content, and he made a lot of reference to Calgary or to Alberta, being that old Wilf lived here. Actually, he didn't live too far away from where I am right now, so it's kind of neat. So yeah, I like to throw in the Canadian content if and when I can, so I'm glad you appreciate it. Thank you very much. And with that said, I think a guy's ready to pull the plug on here. We're 1:15-ish local time here in Calgary, so a guy's gonna have some lunch. My coffee's gotten cold, so that's a good sign that it's now lunchtime. You see, I've been jibber jabbing so much that my coffee is now iced coffee, which is terrible. I don't know why anybody drinks that. Where I'm from, when your coffee gets cold, you pour it down the drain and fix yourself up a fresh cup. But anyway, that said, I think that's going to seal the deal here today for Frankie, New West Reset. Thank you very much for, as I mentioned, shooting in, joining me here live, New West Reset Live, number 15. Top of the morning to you, eh? And once again, happy St. Patrick's Day to you. Whether you're Irish or not, go out and have some fun. Enjoy life a little bit. Just be careful. Be careful out there. Watch out for the people that have had too much fun. Don't get behind the wheel. Maybe take a trolley home. Sure, why not? There you go. Have some green beer. Listen to some Green Day. Then take some green transportation home. Take a trolley home or walk. Just be careful, be safe, and once again, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Question here from Joe before I dip out. Is that your new intro? No, that's going to be Wednesday's video, so you're getting a little sneak peekaboo at the thing. That'll be Wednesday's midweek upload. Alberta Bones, pictures of old bygone era Calgary. So yeah, it looks like that's it. Oh, Orphan Annie sneaking in. Hiya, Annie. Didn't see you there at first. Thanks for shooting in. Appreciate it. Good to see you as always. All right. So until the next one, take care out there. Have yourselves a good one. And we'll talk to you again real soon. Cheers.